How's it going, everybody? This is the Uncanny Omar from Near Mint Condition, the home of collected editions. And today I have the pleasure of sitting down with one of my favorite comic book writers of all time, JM DeMatteis. Did I get it right?
You did it. You did it. You got it right. Congratulations.
Only 5 times the practice.
Well, practice makes perfect, right?
Yeah. How are you, sir?
I'm very good, all things considered. You know, I always say, considering the state of the world, I'm doing just fine.
Considering the state of the world, you're doing just fine. I like that answer. And okay, so I'm assuming I'm not the first person that was about to interview you and asking you how to pronounce your last name. Does anybody ever say, like, what's the JM stand for? Like, does anybody want to call you by anything other than JM?
Yeah, people in my personal life do. And then, of course, people call me other things that they shouldn't be calling me, but that's another issue entirely. The JM is a long story. You know, if you want, I'll give you the short version of it. So I don't know if you've ever read Brooklyn Dreams, my autobiographical graphic novel, but I get into this there. So when I was born, my father wanted to name me John. My mother wanted to name me Mark. Okay. I had an Italian Catholic father and a Jewish mother. Okay. So he wanted John. He like his, I think, and she wanted Mark because she thought John sounded too Christian. So they got into a big to-do about that. But my father got to the records people first, the birth certificate people. So my birth certificate came back as John Mark. My mother did not like that at all. And so for a good part of my childhood, they told me my first name was Mark and my middle name was John. How's that? Then one day my father couldn't take it anymore and revealed to me, no, that's not true. Your first name is John. Your middle name is Mark. And it's like, well, who the hell am I? What's going on here? And when it came time to sort of become a professional writer, and I'm like, I got John, I got Mark, but my friends call me Mark. My family calls me Mark. But, you know, official things call me John. I said, you know what? It worked for, you know, J.M. Barrie and J.D. Salinger and all these other people. I'm going with initials, and that's how
where
J.M. was born. Yeah, that's where it came from. And you know, people call me J.M. and I'm very happy being J.M. because it leaves all that confusion aside.
That's really interesting. Like, I came really close. I know we're not talking about comics yet. I promise we will. I came really close to my name being Jair Omar instead of Omar Jair Valdivieso, because my grandmother loved that name so much. And at the very last second, my dad at the birth certificate said, I kind of like the name Omar more. He changed it. I remember my grandma was so upset. They would tell me stories about how upset they were.
We've all got our family melodrama, you know?
I thought the JM was referred to as Mark for a while in the Marvel books.
No, never, not in the credits. No, I went through a brief period where it was John. I put John Mark in the credits, but that was a very, very brief period. Mostly, it's been JM all along. Mark is reserved for like my family and my closest friends.
Okay.
See, we're going deep here already with all the secrets of my past.
I didn't know we were going to get that deep. I just want to thank you for being here. You have written so many of my favorite stories. And I'm just going to say, not just me. I am speaking for most people most people that watch my channel, that have heard of you, that know of your stories. So much so that for the last 12 years on the Masterworks forum, they've had this thing called the Tiger Eyes Omnibus Poll. And we've started helping for the last 4 years to see, to get everybody involved to vote for the most wanted Marvel Omnis. And yours is always in the top 3. The JM DeMatteis. Did I get it?
You got it.
Oh, so good. Okay, DeMatteis. Okay. The Spectacular Spider-Man by JM DeMatteis. So as the guy that
and Sal Buscema
and our pal Sal, and that's something we are going to talk about. I get to announce those books for Marvel. And I was like, one day. And a couple of years ago, I even took a picture. One of my Polish viewers sent me this wonderful.
Yes, I've got that. They've been reprinted in Italy and Poland and different countries. So and the Polish one is amazing, you know?
The restoration and love that goes into this, except it's not in English, right? So I sent this over to Marvel. I took a picture. I'm like, look, they beat us to it. come on, we got to make this happen.
It
So,
didn't take much to beat them to it. Let's be honest. It's been many years.
well, okay, I'll be honest. It's not just your work in Spectacular Spider-Man, but I'm like, oh my gosh, one day maybe Spectre will have his name on it, like a Spectre collection with your name on it.
I
Now,
would love that. Yeah.
of course, it has graced the pages of JLI. We've had 3 omnis.
Yeah,
of
we just had
JLI.
the most recent omnibus a few months ago. Yeah.
Yeah, with Keith Giffen. Is so weird to speak about him in past tense, but it's just really cool. I love when creators that I love like finally see their name like on the side of these big books, and they're like, "That's my work. I did that." That's awesome. I love that.
Then comes the problem of where the hell in my office am I going to put this? I got when I think it was when the Justice League omnibus came recently. It was like I had to start. Oh, I got to move this over here and move this there. This is going to go in the shelf in the other room just so I could fit all this stuff in. They're gigantic, as you know.
I am well aware of how big these books are.
Yeah, I see. I can see behind you too. Yeah.
I'm also well aware of how to properly store them. My wife said, "You're not a hoarder until it's on the floor. Then that becomes a problem." And I kind of try to abide by that law, no matter how many loopholes I go through. Like right now, we're doing our big giveaway for people that have been watching the channel for a while, and I'm like, well, that's why I have books on the floor, because of a giveaway. So there's always loopholes to where to store these books.
Right. Yeah, I hear you. I know my kids are grown up, so now there are bookshelves in my daughter's room, in her former room, that are now where all these books are moving when they can't fit in my office anymore.
Happy Wednesday, Omar and Mr. DeMatteis. Love your work on Justice League cartoon.
Oh, thank you. Loved working on Justice League Unlimited. Yeah, had a great time on that show.
So, let's actually talk a little bit about your body of work in case people are not familiar with you. And I don't know how they've been watching my channel for a while, but just in case, like, where was it that you first fell in love with comics, and what made you decide, hey, that's kind of what I want to do? I kind of want to write these characters.
I think people have asked me this question, so I've had to really think, because at the time that I grew up, comics were just everywhere. It wasn't a specialty item. It was like I grew up in Brooklyn, so we called it the candy store. It's the place where my father went to buy his newspaper, where they had magazines, where they made, egg creams, and you could get a milkshake, whatever you wanted. And that's where the comics were. But comics were every kind of newsstand, everything. So they were easily accessed, and just about every kid I knew read comics in those days. But when I thought about it, I think my love of that words and pictures combination began even before that, with the Sunday comics section of the New York Daily News. Growing up, every Sunday there would be this giant fold-out section with all these comics, and I think that's. I always say when I teach my writing workshop, we talk about why comics. What is it? What chemical do we have in our brain that is very unique to us, that we see that combination of words and pictures, and that chemical drops, and suddenly, bam! That's it. There's something about that combo of words and pictures, and we are in love with it for the rest of our lives, and it doesn't go away. And that started for me very, very young. And then, from the comic section to comic books, and that love has never gone away. And in terms of wanting to write them, I was always creative. I spent a good part of my childhood drawing. Art was my first love. I'm a musician and a songwriter and a singer, so a lot of my energy went into music. And then I was always a writer as well. I always enjoyed writing and had some skill in that arena. So I always knew I was going to get into the creative arts in some way. I remember being like 14 years old on the phone with a friend saying, "I'm never getting a 9-to-5 job. It will never happen." And I don't know how I knew that, but I did. I had very impractical goals as a teenager. I was either going to be a rock and roll star or a writer, So anyway, long story short, I was a musician. I was a journalist. I did a lot of rock and roll journalism. And then I still love comics. My goal was never to be just a comic book writer. My goal is to be a writer, but I loved comics. So of course I wanted to get involved with comics. And after a number of tries, I started selling stories to the DC anthology books, which back in those days was where you broke in, which was a great way to learn, because they were 5 to 8 page stories with a beginning, middle, and end, and a character arc and themes and everything. And you had to learn the entirety of your craft and fit it into 5 to 8 pages. Perfect way to learn the craft. Working with guys like Paul Levitz and Jack Harris and Len Wein. I call that my comic book college. That's where I learned.
Going back and checking out the work. I know. I swear I'm not making you sound old at all, but it is.
That's okay. I've been around for a while. It's perfectly all right.
Let's call it classic. Let's go back and talk about the classics. But going back and checking out the classic works, it was really interesting how close you all seem to be as writers, as opposed to something like today. Like, I do see pictures like San Diego Comic-Con with all the writers and artist teams like getting together, but it seemed like back then there was just something special about writing comics. It was like the club you wanted to get into, and it's amazing because any forward, by the way, that you've written, I love reading your forwards in every Marvel Masterworks, and then even when it's reprinted in the omnibus editions. To me, that's like a time capsule of going back and see what this world was like.
Right.
And it seemed like you guys were just good friends, like going to barbecues to each other's houses, like getting together for drinks, coming up even with ideas for stories together. And I don't know, it just seems like there was so much more of that then. And I guess it's harder to recapture that magic now.
Well, one of the things was, I lived in New York City. I mean, I moved out of New York City at a certain point, but in the beginning I lived in the city. And even when I moved away, I was close enough that I could come into the office. So it was accessible. I could go to the DC offices. I could go to the Marvel offices. And when you go up there for the day, you'd hang out. And most of us were around the same age. We were contemporaries. We were all sort of coming up together in the business. And what you discover after a while, you think these are your professional acquaintances, and then time goes by. You realize that a lot of these people aren't just your professional acquaintances, they become your friends. And it's as simple as that. We're talking about Keith Giffen. Keith and I worked together for years and years and years and years. For a long time, it was like, oh, this is Keith. This is the guy I work with. But at a certain point, something flips over and it's like, oh, it's not just this guy I work with. This guy's a friend and this is someone that I care about. And that happens a lot. And at Marvel, when I think about Marvel in the 80s, you'd go up, you'd spend the day. I'd go to Mark Gruenwald's office. I'd go to Bob Budiansky's office. I'd go to Danny Fingerroth's office. I'd go to Tom DeFalco's office, and we'd hang out and we'd talk. And we weren't just talking about comics. We were talking about our lives and what was going on. And we became friends. And some of those people become real friends that you carry with you for the rest of your life. But even the people that don't, I've said this several times lately, it's like we're all in love with the same person. It's like we're all in love with the same person, and that person is comics. So imagine, say, a bunch of guys who are in love with the same woman. Even if they don't like each other, they're going to get together and talk about how much they love this woman and how beautiful she is. So I think that's the thing that links all of us in the comic book community is we're all in love with the same person, and that person happens to be comics.
It's so interesting to hear you just say that, because I feel like I knew this already because of the way that you talk about these people in your introduction, whenever you mention Mark Gruenwald. But Mark is a personal hero of mine. I love the way that he thought of comics as more of an interconnected universe that needs some kind of guidance, like that needs to have some kind of vision. And it's interesting because that's the formula they use for these successful MCU movies.
Right.
Like that is the exact same formula. This is happening here. This event is leading into this. We need to start writing these things down. We need to write down the handbook. And I love the handbook of the Marvel. That is one of my favorite things like that he did. But it's really cool to hear you just say these things about these people that you worked with who became friends. And I got to meet Keith Giffen a couple of times at conventions, and he was always one of my favorite people to go and talk to, like about stories and how how writing Justice League International was just so fun, also frustrating at times when you guys were kind of limited to what you could use. Like it's like, hey, you're writing the Justice League, but you can't use Superman and Wonder Woman. You have to.
But that all worked out to our advantage.
Oh, absolutely.
I don't think the book would have been half as good if we were writing those characters, because the whole time we would have had other editors looking over our shoulder telling us, you can't do that, you can't do that, you can't do that, you can't do that. We got all these B-listers, or what people perceive. There are no such thing as B-list characters, as far as I'm concerned. You know, you can take any character. You can take the Z-list character and make it look. I mean, look what they did with the Guardian of the Galaxy's movie. Did anyone care about the Guardians of the Galaxy really before that movie came out? You take the right approach, and a lot of that approach actually was because Giffen did it in comics. And suddenly these characters that you know never sold worth a damn are the biggest properties in the world. So there's no such thing as a B or a C list character. And so, but they gave us these characters that were perceived that way, and that gave us the freedom to do whatever the hell we wanted to do with them. And that's what made Justice League work. We couldn't have done half the stuff we did if we had Superman, Batman, you know, the Green Lantern, Flash, and Wonder Woman, the classic Green Lantern and Flash, you know.
So it's almost like having limitations, or having someone say, well, how about you figure it out instead of using these characters, made it for a better story.
I think so. And I've always been attracted to those characters. When I wrote one of my first gigs when I started at Marvel was Defenders. And I populated that book with B and C list characters because that allowed me to make them whatever I wanted them to be. And I knew that no one was going to tell me I couldn't do it because no one else cared. What are you doing with Devil Slayer and Son of Satan? Nobody cared. I could do whatever I wanted with them.
And those issues stood out so much. I just reread, because I had read them in Epic Collection, and then the new Defenders, those came out in Epics, and then I just read your the Marvel Masterworks that just
came out last week, I think. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. With also had your introduction. Yeah, I don't ever miss those introductions. Like, I really enjoy.
Well, it's fun for me too, because I don't really think about, you know, that stuff a lot in my day-to-day life. I'm busy with the stuff I'm working on now. So when I write these introductions, it's a chance to look back at who I was then, you know, what it was like being a creator then, and also to pay tribute to these people that I worked with. You know, there's a Doctor Strange Masterworks coming out, I guess, the beginning of next year, and they're finally reprinting Into Shambhala, which is this Doctor Strange graphic novel that I did with Dan Green. One of my favorite things that I've ever done with this extraordinary, gorgeous painted artwork that Dan did. Most people only know Dan as an inker. They didn't realize what incredible artistic talent he was. And Dan passed away not long ago, so this is my chance. And Dan was a really good friend. We lived near each other. Our kids grew up together. And so it gave me a chance to look back at that time and pay tribute to my friend as well. So I look forward to writing these introductions. Yeah,
I think we lost Dan last year, if I'm not mistaken. And Keith last year, because I was at New York Comic Con when that happened. It's a shame. And I know that in reading these forwards, you get the sense of like, these people are no longer with us, but this in their ways, they're kind of like their legacy that they leave behind for people to read and enjoy at this particular moment.
Yeah.
And I think there's definitely a certain beauty to that. Please let him know, Omar, Spectacular Spider-Man 200 is my favorite comic of all time. Means the world to me and made me treasure friendships. Oh, that one.
Thank you. Yeah, if I had to pick a single issue Spider-Man story as opposed to an arc, just a one issue story, that's my favorite. That's the one. That's the one.
What is I know you go to, when you go to conventions or whenever people email you or write you, what is the one book that they thank you for? Is it usually like something Spider-Man like Kraven's Last Hunt?
It depends, because I've done so much different work through the years, mainstream work, creator-owned work, so that people know me for different things. There are the people. So I would say a third of what I sign at conventions is either JLI or stuff I've done with Giffen. A third is Spider-Man leaning toward Kraven's Last Hunt, but Spider-Man in general. And a third is everything else. But I have people that come up that only really know me through my creator-owned work. They come up with Moonshadow or Brooklyn Dreams or Blooded Tale or things, and then someone else comes up and they just know me from the Marvel superhero stuff. Someone else just knows the stuff I've done with Keith. So I've done so much different stuff that there are different audiences.
I know my wife's, well, I think I told you this before we started, how she feels about your Spectacular Spider-Man run. And it's good. Spectacular Spider-Man 199 has what I think is one of the best cliffhangers of all time. Mary Jane, we have to talk. I track down the original art for that.
Oh, wow. Yeah. You know, it helps when you have an incredible collaborator. Comics are not the work of a writer or an artist. Comics are collaborative, and you need every piece of that puzzle, and you especially need that writer artist mind meld to happen. And sometimes you could have the two most talented people in the world and put them together and it's not going to click. Working with Sal was just like bang, and we were off right from the start. It was instant chemistry, and it was just a joy to work with Sal, one of the very, very best visual storytellers I've ever worked with. And I'm glad that that people are recognizing that now. I think there was a period of time if Sal was, considered, oh yeah, he's good, he's a solid, he's a workhorse, whatever. No. He's one of the best this business has ever seen. And people are finally tumbling to that.
I think for me, it came with age, like to appreciate somebody like Sal Buscema. Because I was always, because I'm an X-Men guy, hence the title, and Kenny Omar, I know more of his brother's work, Big John, through Wolverine. And then it wasn't until I got older that I was like, oh, he really didn't like drawing superheroes. He wanted to draw more Conan stuff.
No, he was happy on Conan, yeah. When I first started at Marvel, the first regular gig they gave me at Marvel, which look in retrospect was they shouldn't have done that. I was too new, was writing Conan right after Roy Thomas left.
I remember.
Now imagine Roy Thomas has had this 10-year classic run, and suddenly this new guy walks in, and here you can write Conan and work with John Buscema. To say that it was intimidating and unnerving is an understatement.
How was it? Okay, so I read that introduction too. So I needed to
Oh, you're up on all this stuff. Okay.
Dude, you have no idea, sir, how much I love reading this. To me, it's a time capsule. I think it's just as important as the stories. Now, if it's something I've never read before, I definitely read the forward after reading the stories, because sometimes, I know Roy Thomas sometimes will spoil a little bit of what's happening or what happened during a specific issue. But most of the time, since I've read a lot of the stuff in just single issues or collected editions over the years, I can go into a forward. But how was that collaboration with John on Conan? Because you're right. After working 10 years with somebody, he was used to certain storylines, and I'm sure he was used to working like styles being different too. Like your work style had to be different than when Roy was doing it.
Yeah, I'm sure. I'll just say from my point of view, what was amazing to me is that he was just doing breakdowns. He was just doing layouts. They were not very finished pencils, but every single line in those layouts was perfect and gave the inker all the information they needed to finish that art and told the story so clearly. But the truth is, as I said in that introduction that I wrote originally for a Dark Horse collection, he wasn't too happy with what I was doing.
That's what.
And I got the word from the editor. Yeah, John has some issues with the stories. I had two kind of kids trailing along with Conan. He did not like that, I remember. And so I called him up, very intimidated, and he said, I don't remember exactly what the points were. Conan's story should be this, and this. Okay, that's what the next story will be. this, and this. I wrote this plot and tailored it to him, and he drew it, and he left the book and went over to Savage Sword and focused over there. But I couldn't complain because they replaced him with Gil Kane. Yeah. So, I look back when I started out in the business, like I worked with John Buscema, I worked with Gil Kane, I did a couple of stories with Gene Colan. When I started at DC, when I was brand new, I had in the anthology books, I had stories illustrated by Steve Ditko, for God's sake. I worked with Don Heck and Dick Giordano. So, part of me would love to travel back in time with the skill set that I have now and rewrite the stories that I wrote then, because I was still new. But I've learned over the years to honor my younger self and his efforts, because what I've also seen over the years is I may look at an old story and go, oh God, I see every flaw, every crack in it, and then I'm at a convention and someone comes up to me with one of those stories that I might be vaguely embarrassed by. And they say, this story means the world to me. Thank you so much for writing it. So who am I to criticize any of that? I am the least objective person when it comes to my own work. Every once in a while, something clicks and that what you're working on is really, really good. And when I was working on Moonshadow with John J. Muth,
I love that book.
When we finished, the first few issues, I was like, This is the best thing I've ever done. This is an incredible book. And if the whole world, the entire population of Earth came to my door and said, this is terrible, I know that they're wrong. But that's a rare occasion. Most of the time, you do your best with a story, you sail it out into the world. And if the editor is going to call up and say, it's terrible, I go, yeah, maybe it is, and then when they say it's wonderful, I go, I'm surprised. That's great. I'm glad you like it. Because at a certain point, you lose objectivity. It's not even my job to be objective about the work. It's my job to do the very, very best that I can do and create the best story that I can. What my editor makes of it, what the audience makes of it, that's between them and the story. I have no control over that.
You're getting a lot of love from across the seas. JM, te quiero. Saludos desde España y gracias por su trabajo. Not only that, but then from Brazil, somebody's going to see you at CCXP.
Yes, I'm looking forward to that. I have not been to any convention since 2019, and we're going to Brazil in December. So that's
man, really you're exciting. Kicking it off right. You're going to Brazil right in the middle of winter up here. I don't know if you're still in New York or
yeah,
not.
I am. Yeah. But I'm not in New York City. I live quite a bit of ways upstate.
I know we have several questions and praisings in the chat right now, but I did want to ask you a couple of questions, and then we can talk about what you're currently working on and what this Kickstarter is too, because I did want you to talk about that. Out of all the work that you've done, like I know I could tell you're having fun with some of these stories that you're telling and you're putting your all into it. Has there ever been a case where something, and I'm sure it happens, where something is taken from you too soon before you're able to, I had more in me?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, that happens all the time, because it's publishing and books get canceled and we have no control over that. And suddenly this thing that you're connected to and passionate about is gone. I know Keith used to have a real problem. The minute he knew the book was canceled, even if we had 3 more issues to go or something, it was like the heart just dropped out of him, and it's hard. And so you just do the best you can. I could probably think of a bunch of things. When I did a short run on the monthly Doctor Strange comic back in the 90s. And I was probably 2 issues into it when they said, oh, by the way, the book is canceled. And so I finished the storyline I was working on, and they said, could you wrap up these 2 other loose thread plot lines that have been dangling for a couple of years, which were not necessarily the stories I wanted to write, but I wrote them to the best of my ability, and it was gone. Keith and we worked on Justice League 3000 and 3001. That was a book that we could have done for years and years. And then they, after the second year, that was gone. And it just happens plenty of times. It's just the nature of the beast. It's a commercial enterprise. We're busy coming at it from the creative end, but it's a commercial enterprise, and there's a lot of reasons why books get canceled, and I have no control over that. So there's plenty of times your heart gets broken and you're disappointed, but you take a deep breath and you move on to the next project. It's just the nature of the beast.
You are getting all kinds of love from all over the world. I hope JM comes to South Africa for a comic.
Wow.
You could do a world tour. Kick it off in December.
I love doing these international conventions because the people are just amazing. I think it's that they know the chances are if you come to their country, this may be the only time you're going to be there. It's not like the conventions in the United States where I might see the same person at 5 different conventions over the course of a couple of years, and that's great too. There's a familiar face and you have a chat and that's nice. But there's something about the energy that they bring, and before COVID, my wife and I, we went to a lot of different international conventions, and the experiences that we had were just amazing. We were greeted like family, really like family, with such warmth and such affection and such respect and kindness. So and the truth of the matter is that, what we talked about before about this being sort of like this extended family where we're all in love with the same person. That's true here at conventions. It's true when you interact with fans online. I find for the most part, the people that reach out aren't going to be the people that don't like your work. The people that reach out are the people that appreciate the work. The ones, if they're going to reach out to tell you that they hate the work, that's why God made a block button on social media, But I'd say 95% of my experiences on social media as well have been very, very positive. Just good, nice people who appreciate the work. And how can you possibly complain about that? You know, it's a wonderful thing. You know, when I was growing up, you had the letters pages, and that was about it. And I there was a period when I was younger when I wrote letters to the comics, and that was the way you knew maybe you could reach the people that made this stuff. And it was a big deal to see your letter published in a comic book.
Yeah.
Oh my God, yeah. And now, you know, people can just pop in on social media and talk to you there, or show up at a convention and talk to you there. And or we can do this right here, you know, through this magical device that didn't exist not that long ago. You know, it's a great thing.
You're absolutely right about that. Thank you, Spencer, for the super chat. Great get, Uncanny. Thank you. I've been after this man, and I know that sounds weird, like I'm an assassin, but I have been wanting to talk to Mr. DeMatteis for so many years. But I finally just decided to reach out. Wrote my all-time favorite Spider-Man story, Fearful Symmetry, which is awesome. But that is right, a top 5 Joker story that I have been going on about for years, going sane.
One of my absolute favorite things that I've ever done. Yeah. And
yeah.
You know, and probably I like it even more because a lot of people don't know about it. You know what I mean? It's sort of like over in the corner, but it's one of my favorite things that I've ever done.
I did a short, maybe it was on TikTok. Oh my gosh. I did a TikTok because that's just the way the world is. But it was talking about like my favorite Joker stories, and I brought that up. And that is the one that gets, where did you get that trade paperback? But what is this? I've never heard of this, because not a lot of people have heard of it.
Right. They reprinted it once. They reprinted it once, and then it went out of print. And I really hope, DC, if you're listening, please put it back in print. Joe Staten, beautiful art by Joe Staten and Steve Mitchell. And just love that story. Love that story.
And you gave us the OG One Punch Batman. How did that feel to write? Like, how did that even work with you and Keith? How did that start? Because you're a writer.
So how it worked, yeah, I know. It was an odd thing that I kind of stumbled into backwards, because Keith really wanted to do Justice League, and he harangued and harassed Andy Helfer, our editor, who was such a huge piece of that puzzle. Andy was just one of the best editors to ever sit behind a desk at DC. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, Keith had been plotting things, but he never took the leap and started writing his own stuff. He hadn't done that yet. And he was a great writer in his own right, as John Lennon said, W-R-I-T-E. But he wasn't quite ready. And Andy said, come in and can you dialogue this stuff? Because Keith doesn't quite have the confidence yet. And I'm like, you know, dialoguing someone else's work. And he showed me, Keith would draw his plots were mini comics that he drew out, you know, beautiful. And his kind of like what I said about John Buscema, really simple layouts that everything you wanted, all the emotion, all the humor, all the action was all there in these layouts. And I read his first plot and was like, you do not need me. This guy can do it on his own. No, we really want you to do it. And I argued with them for about 6 months and almost quit the book at one point, because like, no, what are you doing? I don't need to do this. You don't need me. It was one of those kind of things. This is too easy. It's too much fun. I should be hard, shouldn't it? You know? And then all of a sudden one day I woke up and went, oh, this is a phenomenal gig. What's happening here? We're having such a great time, you know? And so the great thing about working with Keith, I've occasionally worked with other people where they did the plot and I did the script, and they can be very territorial about their plot. They don't want you to change things. They want you to execute their vision. That was not Keith. You know, what I learned, and when you study like Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, you see it in their work together as well. You can do so much just through the scripting over someone else's plot. Through the dialogue, through what you do with the relationships, you can add entire new plot lines, entire new relationships. And Keith always allowed me the freedom, and Andy always allowed me the freedom to play with the stories. So if I wanted to bring in some plot line that wasn't there in Keith's plot, I was free to do it. If I wanted to develop a relationship that maybe wasn't developed in the plot, I was free to do that. And then, you know, Keith had these beautiful rock solid plots. I mean, so much great material in there. So he was the foundation, and I would build rooms on top of that foundation. Then he would see what I would do. He would build on that. I would see how he built. I would, you know, and we used to say it was like a game of tennis. We'd hit the ball back and forth, but it wasn't a collaboration, especially for those 5 years on Justice League and Justice League Europe and Justice League Quarterly and all those millions of books that we did. It wasn't like we were ever sitting in the same room working on a story. We were a machine. I'd get the plot in the mail. I'd write the script in 2 days, back to Andy, on to the next issue. You know, it was quick. And I think the quickness of it in some ways is what made it work, because there was a spontaneity to the work. You know, I would just get the plot and get these characters talking to each other, and off we go. And then as the years passed, and as Keith and I got to know each other better, and there was this gap of 10 years between the end of our Justice League run and formerly known as the Justice League, which I think it was 9 or 10 years later. We did it with Kevin McGuire. The brilliant Kevin McGuire came back, and the three of us kind of went, oh, this is really good. We had no clue, because when you're a freelancer, whatever gig's in front of you is the gig, and when the gig is over, you move on to the next one. It's just the way it works. So we all moved on. We didn't really look back and go, oh yeah, remember those glory days on Justice League? No, we didn't think about it. And then we got back together, and it was like, oh, there's something special that happens when we all work together that doesn't happen when we work individually. And so we certainly did more projects with Kevin, and Keith and I kept working together for decades, straight through Scooby Apocalypse, which I guess ended in 2018 or 2019. We just kept working together.
That's such an underrated series too, because people look at it and they're like, oh, Scooby-Doo. Whatever.
Well, that's what I felt in the beginning. Scooby-Doo, what are you talking about? And it turned into one of the most fun gigs of my career. We had such a great time with that book. We did it for 3 years. It was great.
How did you guys even come back together? Like, okay, so there was not necessarily the Justice League, and then there was another series, a mini series which is also
there was formerly known as the Justice League. Then there was I Can't Believe It's Not the Justice League, which was part of Justice League Classified, I think the book was called.
Yeah, they ended up
yeah. So yeah, DC just asked. I think Dan Raspler was the editor, I believe, on was it Dan Raspler? Maybe it wasn't. God, that's so long ago, I don't remember. But whatever it was, we got a call from DC. Hey, you want to do this? You guys want to get back together and do this? And I was like, sure, why not? But I always say when we first started, I was terrified, because I always liken it to those TV reunion movies when, a show hasn't been on in 15 years and then it's returned to Mayberry or Mary and Rhoda get back together or whatever it is.
Dallas show.
Usually you just kind of go, oh, no, they shouldn't have done this. And I was really afraid. And then about 5 pages into it, I was like, oh my God, this is more fun than ever. And we just took off from there. And then I Can't Believe It's Not the Justice League, formerly known as, won the Eisner that year. So I guess we did something right.
Oh, it was to those of us that had grown up reading the JLI stories, those kind of stories like really brought the magic back. And it's really cool, by the way, if you haven't read the omnibus editions, it is collected in the third omnibus. Both of those stories are collected in the third omnibus. So that's why, when people, I understand when people get upset about comic books and comic book characters, because I was also like that too. I kind of let things just slide these days. I'm 46 years old. I don't have the time to get angry about comic stories as much as I used to in my 20s.
Yeah.
But when Identity Crisis came out, I do remember that one was the one that made me so angry, because I had just read the little miniseries about the reunion of these characters with Sue and all these characters that I enjoyed so much from my youth. And then this happens, and I don't want to spoil what happens in case people haven't read it. And I think that's the one time that I was like, oh, I'm really upset at this book. Like, it made me so
right. And I had two reactions myself at the time. It was like, what? Because it felt like for a few years there, one of the major goals at DC was to completely undo everything that we did. Like, someone decided, comics with a sense of humor are not the way to go. So let's make this as grim dark as we possibly can. But the flip side is, and then you take a breath and you let go of it, because the flip side is it's a shared universe, and that's what happens in a shared universe. We all get to play with the same toys, and I get to hand the toys off to the next guy, just as the guy before me handed the toys off to me. And everybody's got a different story to tell. And that's the nature of the beast. And the conclusion that Keith and I came to when we were doing Justice League 3000 and 3001, where little by little we rebuilt our old Justice League, but in the future, was that our stuff exists in its own universe. It may cross over. It seemed to cross over with certain storylines in the main DC universe. But in my mind, whatever happened with Max and Beetle and all that stuff, take that story for what it is on its own. Very well done story, but that's not our Max and that's not our Beetle. It's a different universe. And the truth is, every story is its own universe, really. So you can't get hung up on, oh, I killed off Aunt May and she was back a year later, or this or whatever it is. It doesn't matter. And I've done the same thing, I'm sure, to other people, where they did a story and I did something to undo it. And I'm sure for like 5 minutes they lost their mind. And then we all shrug and we go, it's comics. That's what happens. We're all playing with the same toys.
So when you're on a book and you leave said book for whatever reasons, Do you keep up with the characters? Like, do you read the comics that are still going? Like, whenever you left Spider-Man, did you keep up with Spider-Man? Whenever you left the Justice League book, did you keep up with Justice
Oh,
League
probably not.
or
Probably not.
Spectre?
It's sort of like you're going out with a girl and then you break up. You want to see the pictures on Facebook of who she's dating now or anything. You know what I mean? And also after a certain point, when I first got in the business, and I used to get everything that Marvel published and everything DC published for free, and I would read everything. And after a certain point, I couldn't do that anymore. I focused on my own work, and I read the stuff that I need to read in order to work through the stories that I'm working on, which is always fun. I'm doing research today. I must spend 3 hours reading comic books. That's great. I love that. Or I read the stuff that friends of mine in the business say, hey, I just did this. I'd really love for you to read this. And they send it to me and I read it and I love it. But, the days when I've read everything and kept up on everything, that's why you have an editor. They'll keep you up. And I love to get on the phone with my editors and they'll inform me of what's going on with continuity in this book or that book. And I'm like, really? I have no idea, And they'll send me, digital files of like 30, 40 comic books to read in order to be able to do this next series that I'm working on. And like I said, that's always fun. One of the I look at that, and when I work in animation, a lot of times the research is I have to watch cartoons. So it's like, oh, this is my job. I have to watch cartoons and read comic books. Gee, it's rough, isn't it?
This is okay. I do want to talk about your era in cartoons, but I do not believe Mr. DeMatteis. Still got
You did it.
Had too much experience writing X-Men in the past. So how did? Oh, you're gonna kill me for this, JM. Magneto. Because I believe that is not
Magneto. I'm the only one. Let me tell you why. It's really simple. Take the O off the end. What's that word? It's magnet. You put an O at the end of magnet, it's Magneto. There's nothing over the E to make it a long E. I know everyone says it and it's stupid and it's petty, but I just like to say Magneto.
Wait a minute. English is my second language, and I've had this argument with vineyards for so many years. I'm like, you're taking vine and yard together, but you're making a new word called vineyard? Why isn't it a vineyard?
Right. All right, we got off the check. So how did it come about?
Yeah, how did that come about?
I had a great time. This came out last year. And when I was a kid, when I first discovered Marvel Comics, everybody read and loved Fantastic Four and Spider-Man. Then everyone found their little passion book. And my little passion book was the X-Men, the early X-Men. That was not a big book in those days. It was a low tier Marvel book, but I had a mad love for the X-Men. And I've done a little bit of X stuff over the years. I had a short run on X Factor, a couple of other little things here and there. But they came to me mainly because they had this idea of really doing a deep dive into Magneto's psyche. And they know that one of the things that I love to do, especially with the villains, is to really peel these guys apart and see who they are, see what motivated them, see what made them. And so the idea was to go back to those early Magneto stories through the lens of what we know about Magneto later on, and put those things together and kind of reveal his psyche and his character in new ways. I couldn't say no to that. So I got a chance to revisit some of those early X-Men stories that I so loved, but through the lens of the much more complex and nuanced Magneto that we know. Probably one of the most, if not the most complex, nuanced character in the Marvel Universe. Really, really a deep character. I had such a good time, and Todd Nauk did the art on that one. Beautiful, beautiful art. We created a wonderful new villain for the book that I'd love to revisit. I just had a great time working on that book. Really, really, both for the nostalgia of revisiting those old X-Men stories and for the fun of trying to reconcile these different faces of Magneto, and finding, so who is this guy? And that's the question I always bring to whatever characters I'm working on, whether the story succeeds or fails. I want to know who they are and what makes them tick. That to me is what makes a great story.
Hello, Mr. DeMatteis. I was 9 years old back in Portugal. You were all over the place, JM. I love it. I was reading the Captain America stories written by you and drawn by Mike Zeck. That was the best Captain America ever.
Yeah, great time. Zeck, talking about Sal, Zeck, one of the greatest visual storytellers, again, that I've ever worked with in this business. Just unbelievable. You look at his Zeck page, forget the words, just look at the page. You know exactly what's happening in the story. And I've always said one of the reasons why Kraven's Last Hunt worked the way it did was because Mike executed everything I asked for in my plot in terms of action, in terms of emotion. You could see it all in the characters' faces. You knew what the action was. A lot of times, especially if you're working Marvel style plot first, the writer gets the art back and it's like, oh, this isn't clear. I have to write dialogue and captions explaining what's going on in the pictures. Never have to do that with a Mike Zeck. So that's why in Kraven's Last Hunt, what's the whole story? It's all interior monologue of the characters. We're going deeper and deeper and deeper into their psyches, because the visual aspect of the story, the surface emotions of the story, are all there in Mike's art. So I was free to go as deep as I wanted to. Had another artist drawn that story, I might not have been able to do that. So Mike Zeck, phenomenal, just phenomenal.
You're a gentleman and a scholar, sir. You have praised your collaborators and everything that people have been asking about.
But it's true,
But not everybody does that, though. And I'm not taking that away from you, by the way. I'm just saying, like, I think it's.
I can write the best story in the world, and if it's not with the right artist, that story will die. And I've seen work where I did a great job and the artist did a great job, but somehow it came together and it didn't work. It's that magic thing that has to happen, and that includes the coloring and the lettering. Every aspect of the process has to really work to make a great comic book story.
Hey, Dana. And this is Kraven's Last Hunt as a classic and probably Zeck's best. It's really good. And on top of that, I got to announce the Web of Spider-Man omnibus that will be coming out next year and will fully collect all of Kraven's Last Hunt.
Oh, wow. See, that's the thing that one never anticipates. I'm working on this story in 1987, and no one's thinking about things getting reprinted. Same thing I said before. Great gig. Story's over. It's done. On to the next one. When they reprinted it like a year later in a hardcover, in those days, that was a big deal.
That's huge.
You don't think about the stuff getting reprinted, let alone in a nice hardcover. And now for whatever it is, 35 years or more, it just keeps getting reprinted in new editions and reprinted and reprinted. And I'm also happy to say they pay me every time that happens, which is a wonderful thing. But, to have people come up to me at conventions and say, I just read this last week. That's what you hope for, that you have a story that lives on and on and on and on like that. It's a great thing. So I'm very grateful. And again, that's not about me. That's between the story and the audience. There are stories that I may think are far better than Kraven's Last Hunt. Not in any way to not Kraven's Last Hunt. I think it's a great story. But there are stories that mean more to me than that. But the audience makes a decision somewhere, and they fall in love with the story, regardless of what I think about it. And that gives that story life, and it becomes a success, and it moves on. Conversely, sometimes stories come out and they die and no one's interested. And 10 years later, all of a sudden, everyone's coming up to me to talk about some story that when it came out, I thought nobody could care less about. So sometimes it takes time. Sometimes they click immediately. It's an interesting thing.
Do you feel that way about something like Moonshadow? Because I feel like Moonshadow was one of those books that was printed at, was it Epic? It was
originally at Epic, and then we took it to Vertigo about 10 years later, and we did the sequel, Farewell Moonshadow, at Vertigo, and then a couple of years ago, Dark Horse did a beautiful hardcover edition.
Yeah. So do you feel that has happened with the introduction of collected editions? Like that work, Moonshadow could have been one that not a lot of people would have been talking about if not for the hardcover collection that came out that introduced so many new readers in a
right.
new generation.
Right. When Moonshadow came out, it was very well received. It was like it completely changed the trajectory of my career. It was like because it brought things to another level. And again, John J. Muth, you work with an artist of that caliber, you have to up your game. And then I would do what I would do, and he would up his game. It was just an amazing collaboration that, as we were talking about earlier, grew into a great friendship. We're still very good friends after all these years. We live near each other. We get together for lunch. He's just a great guy and one of the single most talented human beings I've ever met. And it came out and, it did well. It was very well received. It was nominated for awards, blah, blah, blah. But just what you're saying, time goes by. And then it was out of print. We took it to DC. DC collected it, and then it went out of print for quite some time. And then Dark Horse brings it out again. And suddenly, that's exactly what you said. We get a whole new audience for the book, and it gets rediscovered. And, Moonshadow is one of probably 2 or 3 favorite things I've ever done. If I had to say, these are my favorite. Moonshadow is really near and dear to my heart for the collaboration, for the quality of the work, and also because for me, that was when I kind of stepped outside of the Marvel and DC mindset, which was self-created. I'm not blaming anybody else for putting it there, and just wrote as me with my own voice. I wasn't filtering Stan Lee, Steve Gerber, Len Wein through my head while I was writing these superhero characters. I was writing my own creations, my own way, the same way I would as if I were writing a novel. And that really freed me as a writer. And I went from Moonshadow pretty much directly, there might have even been some overlap, to Craven's Last Hunt. Moonshadow ended in 87 and I wrote on Craven in 87. Had I not done Moonshadow, I would have not had this space opened in my brain creatively to bring a very different approach to that book than if I had written it 2 or 3 years before.
All right, since you brought it up, what else would you hold up there as your favorite JM? If you were to give somebody like, here's like four stories that I think you'd enjoy by.
I've been doing this for so long that to say 4 books, I did a thing, I put it on my website maybe 6 months ago. So people want to dig through my website. I did a list of and I can't say they're the best, but my favorite projects,
Favorite. Yeah.
But the things that come to mind are Moonshadow, Brooklyn Dreams, which was my autobiographical graphic novel that I did with Glenn Barr, which is, it's pretty much tied with Moonshadow.
That one was published by Paradox Press, right? Like
originally Paradox Press, then reprinted by Vertigo, and then reprinted by IDW, and now next year we will see a new edition from Dark Horse.
Oh, I love hearing that. Go on, sir.
So Brooklyn Dreams. Now, one of the most obscure ones that many people, if not most, listening to this have never heard of was something I did with Mike Plug called Abadazad. We did it for CrossGen. Right.
Somebody just mentioned that a little bit ago.
Oh, I didn't see that go by. Oh, that's great. That's great.
I'm sorry to find it, but go ahead.
Mike Plug, another one of just the single most talented visual storytellers I've ever worked with, and an amazing human being who's had an amazing life and career. And we got together on Abadazad. It was a story. One of those things that happened. I had a story I've been wanting to tell for like 10 years, and finally I get together with Plug, and I could not have imagined it with anybody else but Mike. And we did it for CrossGen, but what we didn't know when we signed the contract was that CrossGen was already sinking into the swamp and disappearing from sight. So we got 3 issues out. We did 4 issues. We got 3 issues out, and then CrossGen was gone. And then what happened was Disney Books swooped in because they saw Abadazad and loved it, and we signed to do a series of kids books of Abadazad that were a combination of prose and comics. So there would be prose sections and comic sections. Lots of new illustrations by Mike, beautiful color by Nick Bell. And same thing happened. We got 3 books out in the world. We'd done the 4th book, and there was a change of editor, and the woman that was overseeing the project left the company. People that came on suddenly didn't want to do it anymore, and we got left in the swamp again. So there are 3 issues of the comic book in existence and 3 volumes of the book series in existence. And that may be the biggest heartbreak of my career because I have so wanted to finish that. But Disney came in and they bought it. They bought it lock, stock, and barrel from us. And I can't complain because they paid us very well to do it. And what we were presented with at the time was like, oh, we're going to do 12 books, and there's a potential for other media, and there's a potential, next thing you know, you're imagining the Abadazad ride at Disneyland, and then the whole thing just disappeared. So, but I think it's one of the very best things I've ever done, and it is so dear to my heart, Abadazad, and I still hope in my secret heart of hearts that someday, some way, we'll be able to finish it.
Well, I mean, Marvel has had a record of reprinting a couple of books.
Yeah, we have danced around this with Disney for on and off for years. It's just, and it ends up being
there we go. There's
very frustrating.
Abadazad.
Yeah, exactly right. That's right. And the third of the actual books was only published in England, so it's very rare and often very expensive if you want to get it online. But boy, love that project. So that's really dear to my heart. Then I look at everything I did with Keith, which is in a universe of its own. That has to be on the list. I can't pick really one Spider-Man thing. I've been doing Spider-Man from practically the moment I got in the business to I'm still writing Spider-Man today with Shadow with the Green Goblin. So I can't say one. I put all the Spider-Man work together. And then there are so many other things that if you go find that list on my website, there'll be a whole bunch of things, and all these other creator-owned projects that I've done over the years, leading up to what I'm doing now on Kickstarter with the Demultiverse books, How was that
How
for
did
transition?
so tell me about that. What brought
Gee,
that up?
I'm glad you brought that up.
That was a really good. It's almost like you should be a writer.
Yeah, I don't know.
So tell me
So
about it, and I'm going to share the link in the description of the
yeah,
video as
please
well.
do. We are in the last week. There's 6 days left to this Kickstarter, I believe. So please, if I'll explain what it is, but if you're someone who has read and enjoyed my work, this is the work that's straight from my heart. We launched. So what happened was, I've been watching Kickstarter for some time because I'm always working on a creator-owned book. I'm doing my mainstream comics. I'm doing creator-owned books. I'm doing TV and film. I'm doing prose, but I'm always looking for a venue for the creator-owned work. And Kickstarter, because there's no wall between the creator and audience there. It's just you and the work and the audience literally making the work possible through supporting the Kickstarter. But I also could tell that it was a lot of work, and nothing I could have ever handled on my own. So my friend David Baldy, who has a long history working in TV as a writer and a producer, I was talking to him about it one day, and he said, "I'll do it with you." And David has what I don't have. David has a business brain. I don't have a business brain. So we got together. He said, "Well, what do you want to do?" And I pitched him like 4 ideas, and he said, "How about this? Let's do all of them. Let's do 4 number 1, basically pilot issues." And so what the great thing that we did was 4 different books, 4 different artists, 4 different genres, 4 different styles. And I got to get all these ideas out in the world at once. And we even by the end slipped in a 5th bonus book. That's not part of the main books, but it was people really responded well to this bonus book as well. So the first, and I'll tell you about the books a little bit in a minute. The first Kickstarter did really, really well. And we took a vote at the end of the first Kickstarter. So which one of these books, we wanted to see which one they wanted to see continue as a complete miniseries. But one of the options that we gave them was all of them. And that's what won the vote. So with this second Kickstarter that's live now, we have second issues of all the books. We have 5 second issues. If you go to the Kickstarter page, you'll be able to read all about it. There's a video there that I did explaining all the books. But so that's the story on the Kickstarter. The books are, if you want to hear about them.
Of course I do.
Okay, good. I want to make sure. I don't want to give you too much information if you don't want it.
Of course I do.
So there's a book called Godsend, which my one-liner is sort of Jack Kirby's New Gods meets The Matrix meets Philip K. Dick. It's a story about the nature of personal identity, the nature of reality, and gods descending into our world, and who we think we are versus who we really are, what we think reality is versus what it truly is. And that's just the little tease for that one. The first issue was done by Matthew Dow Smith, a wonderful artist. Matt couldn't come back because he's working on his own projects right now. We got Scott Koblish came in and blew the doors off the book, did a beautiful job with that. And we have the variant cover, though Matt Smith came back to do each book has a variant cover too. So the variant cover for the second issue is by Matthew Dow Smith. Second book is called Layla in the Lands of After, another one of my favorite. I keep saying they're my favorite collaborators, all these people, but they all are. I've been so lucky to work with so many phenomenal artists.
And
Sean
they've been lucky
McManus.
to work with you.
Thank you. Sean McManus and I originally first worked together on Dr. Fate at DC for 2 years. One of my favorite collaborations, one of my favorite gigs. And we've had this project. We've been kind of working on it in the corner for a long time. And finally, we get to bring it out into the world through the Demultiverse, through Spellbound Comics, which is this little imprint that David created for these books. And so Layla is the story of a 13-year-old girl who thinks she's sort of gone over the rainbow to a magical Oz, but discovers that, sorry, this is not Oz. This is the afterlife. You were just hit by a car and you're dead. And she has this small window to get back to her body. But if that window closes, she's stuck in the lands of after forever. So in tandem with her grandfather and her cat, both of whom are dead as well, they go on this search to find the way home for her to get back to her body before that window closes. Sean is like Mike Ploog. Speaking of Mike Ploog, his stuff, he does fantasy as good as anybody has ever done it in comics. And his stuff, he can do the darkness, but there's always sort of a smile beneath it. There's whimsy to it, really magical, beautiful art. And I should mention the colorist, Arthur Hesley, did a beautiful job on this book. And so that's Layla. The third book is Wisdom with Tom Mandrake. Now, Tom Mandrake is an artist I'd never worked with before, but he might have done an issue or two of Scooby just to fill in, but we'd never worked on a serious project together.
Tom Mandrake is one of my favorites too.
I've loved his work for years, going back to his work on the Spectre with John Ostrander, And so Wisdom is a supernatural Western. It's sort of John Ford's The Searchers meets Lord of the Rings in the Old West. That's my one-liner on that one. It's a big epic clash between the forces of light and darkness, but set in the Old West. And if you want mood and mystery, if you want then just look at the Spectre and you'll see how Mandrake can deliver that. If you've ever seen that miniseries he did called The Kents, which took place in the West, he's great with cowboy stuff too. So he was the perfect artist. And it's a story. It's one of those stories that kind of came to me almost like in a dream and in a movie in my head. And I started writing, and before I knew it, I had like a 50-page outline for this thing. So again, so grateful to get that out in the world. I should mention that the variant cover for Layla was done by Marguerite Sauvage, a wonderful, wonderful artist. And the variant cover for Wisdom is done by Patch Zurcher, another great artist who I really have wanted to work with for some time, and we're still trying to find a big project to work on together. So those are those three books. And the fourth book is the closest thing to a traditional superhero story. It's called Any Man, except when you dig into it, what you discover is that everything you think about this character, every little bit of traditional superhero lore, is a complete lie. And there's conspiracies within conspiracies and plots within plots going on there. And the artist on Any Man is David Baldion. I worked with David a couple of years ago at Marvel on the Ben Reilly miniseries. He's great. We talked about Sal earlier. Oh, go ahead.
I did want to ask about that. Somebody was asking about how that even got started with Ben Reilly. And I know somebody's asking about the Clone Saga, and I promise you've asked.
We'll get to that. Let me finish this, and we will get to that.
Go ahead and tell me about.
I'm happy to talk about whatever. It's okay. So I pulled David in on Any Man, and David has that. Is a very different style than Sal, but what he has that Sal has is that incredible energy that you want to bring to a superhero epic that just kind of bursts off the page. So basically, like I said, I don't want to give too much away about Any Man. You think it's a very traditional superhero thing, and then it twists, and then it twists again. And the joy for me as a writer, I'm working on the second issue, and another twist pops up that I didn't even know was coming. And when I don't know it's coming, and I'm writing the story, I know I'm onto something good. So those are the four main Demultiverse books. What we did with the first time around is that we collected them. You could buy the individual issues, you could buy the variant covers, or we did a collected edition as well. All the first issues and the first collected edition, that's all available as add-ons as part of this Kickstarter. So you're not going to jump into the second issues and not know what the hell's going on. You can get all the first issues. So our bonus book is called The Edward Gloom Mysteries, and my one-liner on that is, what if Charles Dickens wrote Frankenstein? The main character is a monster cobbled together by a mad genius, but he's not a monster. He is the most the true monster is the woman that created him. He is the most sensitive soul. He's a poet. He's a musician. He's a philosopher. He's a historian. He's a mathematician. And in the course of our story, he essentially has to become a detective and a monster hunter as his city is invaded by all these monstrous forces. So it's a really, really fun story. It has a kind of a Dickensian flavor. But again, it's like if you merged Frankenstein, if Mary Shelley and Charles Dickens got together to work on Frankenstein, that's what I imagine the result would be the Edward Gloom Mysteries. And the art is by a wonderful artist from Greece named Vasilis Gagzilis. I worked with him on some projects at IDW, and he brings just the right mood and mystery and horror to this series. So those are all the books. I won't bang the drum too loudly, but I have to say, there's a cliche, we can't do it without you. With a Kickstarter, that cliche is literally true. We met our funding goal right away, but what we have to do is build on that so we can make sure that these stories will continue to issue 3 and issue 4 and beyond. Because I have
in collected editions.
And well, yeah, exactly. And someday a giant omnibus that you can talk about on your show. So, and in order for that to happen, we really need everyone to come along on the ride. And if you've enjoyed my work, please, we only have 6 days to go, and we need you all. So hop over to Kickstarter and please give us a boost. I'd really appreciate it. And I think you will get some great comics in return.
I have.
This concludes our commercial.
just having. We have a huge thunderstorm that's going through us right now. I just got a message on my iPhone, and I was like, please don't cut him off right in the middle. And
I'll
he's gonna be like,
I'll
"Man,
make
that
you a
old
deal.
part,
If we
sure."
get cut off, I'll come back. How's that?
Oh, you got a deal. But I wanted you to know because I'm like, oh my gosh, that would be so horrible if it cuts him off, and then he's like gonna probably think, man, that Omar guy was a jerk. He cut me off like in the middle of my whole spiel. So you had mentioned Ben Riley,
Yeah.
and somebody has asked a lot, and I don't want to make sure I miss it. But you are still getting so much praise here, so much love. But Mark is wondering, super curious to know how you, Mr. DeMatteis, would have ended the Clone Saga.
I would have ended it the way we originally planned to end it. You know, the original plan was not to go on for 150 years, to do it in maybe 6 months to a year, because if 6 months to a year weaving through all the Spider-Man books is a lot of story. The plan was Ben comes back. He thinks he's the clone. At a certain point in the story, Peter discovers he's the clone. Mary Jane is pregnant. They go off to Portland. They live there happily ever after. Ben becomes Spider-Man. We were gonna relaunch all the books with #1s, introduce new supporting cast, new villains, and then we always had Peter out there, could always come back and get involved in adventures whenever we wanted him. And that was the original plan.
So there was a miniseries called How the Clone Saga.
Right.
It was called Spider-Man Clone Saga, How It Should Have Ended, or something like that.
Right.
But it was like
right.
a pit.
Well, here's the thing. If you talk to all of us that were working on the books at that time, and we all tell you how we thought it was supposed to end based on what we all agreed on, then we probably all have a different version. But I think I hit the general beats of what was expected, you know, what we wanted to do. We really wanted to use that energy to relaunch the books. Art Vandelay.
He's an importer-exporter.
I know. I've heard that. Yeah.
Wanted to thank Mr. DeMatteis for his incredible work. I'm somewhat recent fan. I love hearing that. Only discovering his work these past few months, but in my opinion, he is the greatest writer to ever grace the webhead.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. And I'm a big fan of Vandelay Industries, so it goes both ways.
The real Clone Saga. Thank you so much, Andrew. Andrew is another guy that has been pushing for you.
Oh, I know Andrew. Sure.
Yeah. Oh, you know Andrew? Okay.
Yeah. Oh, he's been banging the drum for a Spectacular Spider-Man omnibus for years.
And like I said, he's not alone. For many years, just running this channel, I see what people want, and it's amazing. It's Anderson's Daredevil. It's JM DeMatteis. DeMatteis. There we go. His run on Spectacular Spider-Man, or just Spider-Man in general. These Kickstarters look phenomenal. Can we still get volume 1s as well?
Yes, as I said, volume 1, if you go to the Kickstarter, they're all available as add-ons. So you can get them there.
So there you go. The Clone Saga was,
no one's going to be left in the dark with the first issues. You can get them all.
Lost Years, even with me not loving the Clone Saga, I love that. Lost Years.
That was maybe my favorite. That and the single issue Death of Aunt May story. That for me was the peak of my involvement in the Clone Saga. Loved working on Lost Years. I got to work with John Romita Jr., who I'd never really worked with before, and love that story. That's when I really fell in love with Ben Riley and Kane, two phenomenal characters. And it's been nice over the years to see those characters come back.
You have no idea how much you just made my buddy Omnibo's day. Like you saying Kane and Ben Riley are two of your favorite characters. You just
absolutely.
It is a crime not to have them all collected. Well, we do have a mention, I did announce the Web of Spider-Man Omnibus Volume 1 coming out in 2025. So you will see some of his work in there, of course. But you're right. I would love to
this is not an official thing with inside information, but I have a feeling that you will see a Spectacular Spider-Man omnibus before too long. Just the fact that, we've seen these other editions around the world, that means all the stuff is scanned and ready to go. I suspect Marvel will be doing something with that.
I will give you something that they finally said. They said, "Oh yeah," so finally, David Gabriel said, "Oh yeah, that's nice, but ours would be bigger." Amazing Spider-Man 400 is an all-timer. I will say, no matter what you've heard about the Clone Saga, I still to this day think there are some stellar issues in there. And I am reminded every time I read the Clone Saga in omnibus format just how long it went. But that first omnibus, it's so good. I didn't want to put it down. There's so much mystery. There's so much, and then you get to issue 400, and it rips your heart out because it's written so well. And the fact that it's a little of a bit of a spoiler, but the fact that Ben can't, like, mourn like Peter and MJ breaks your heart even more because he's just outside in the rain. Oh man. Ben is my favorite Spider-Man as well. Thank you for all your work. We ride until we get funeral arrangements and over. Yeah, people are talking about specific stories here.
And that was peak Sal funeral arrangements. I mean, he did great work on that whole run. But I remember getting the first pages on the first part of that Vulture story, and I was like, wow, he has now reached a whole other level. Just beautiful work. Thank you, Spider-Man Redemption, with Mike Zeck and Bob McLeod. Yeah.
How can you spoil a 30-year-old book? Well, somebody is new to Mr. DeMatteis' work. I didn't want to spoil what happened in a particular story. Amazing Spider-Man 400 was something else. Wish May stayed dead. I will say, like, how did you? We talked a little bit about this earlier when you talk about killing off a character, and then you're like, oh, they brought them back, okay, or they killed you had fun writing.
It's a double-edged sword, because it's, as I said before, it's a shared universe. People just don't stay dead in mainstream superhero comics, but you hope. And then when you're writing that death, though, you can't think about that. You have to write that as if this is it. This is the final appearance of this character. Harry Osborn died. He's dead. Aunt May died. She's gone, and she's never coming back. And you have to write that with your heart. Because if you're thinking, oh, we should be back in 6 months, you can't put the emotion into that story that it requires. And usually it takes some time for them to come back. Harry Osborn stayed dead for decades, as did Craven. Aunt May came back really quick. So if anything, I was a little annoyed about that, I have to say, honestly. It was like, just wait a little while. I know someone's going to bring her back eventually. But it doesn't matter. That story is there. It doesn't matter whether she's alive in this book or not. If you sit down and read the story and take it on its own terms, you'll enjoy the story. It doesn't, because like I said, it's a shared universe. I brought back people's dead characters. They brought back mine. That's just the way it works. And no, there isn't already a spectacular Spider-Man omnibus. Not in my run. No,
maybe
not in this country.
Maybe this one here. We're here.
Yeah, I've got a beautiful Italian edition of The Child Within, and some Spanish editions of all this stuff.
Polish edition here.
Yeah,
this one's beautiful too.
That was the very first one. Was the Polish edition? Was the first omnibus came out?
Yeah,
there.
One of my viewers sent this to me. Oh my goodness, I guess it's been about 4 or 5 years ago. And I was like, wow, this is really cool. Wow, this is not in English. Although your name is, and so Sal's name. It's a Spectacular Spider-Man.
I should mention, since we're talking about Spider-Man, that the final issue of Spider-Man Shadow of the Green Goblin came out today. So that's the current Spider-Man project that I'm working on. Had a lot of fun.
My wife has been picking those up.
Great.
My question may have been answered already and missed it. Hold on, Richard. I know you asked a little bit ago, so I'm trying to catch up with chat. The Cole Clone Saga is my favorite story of all time. Love JMD and everyone else's work on it. How was it? Okay, here we go. How was it to get to write Ben Reilly again? I feel like you made him the character we know and love.
Yeah, when you work with these characters, you believe in these characters, not as characters, but as three-dimensional people. And I've often said, when I look at Ben and Peter, these people that I've spent so much time with, I know them better than I know some of my friends, because I know everything that goes on in their head and heart, So when you come back to a character after time away, it's sort of like if you haven't seen a friend in 10 years or 15 years, and you go out to lunch and you sit down and you catch up and you get to know each other again, and something clicks and off you go. When they called me about the Ben Reilly miniseries, all I had to hear was the words Ben Reilly, and I was like, yeah, I'll do it.
That's it. That's awesome.
Yeah, because I love Ben. And that also, the editor on all these Spider-Man miniseries I've done the past few years is Danny Chasm, and he's just one of the best editors I've ever worked with. And so, so we've developed this wonderful relationship, and we keep working together in all these Spider-Man projects. So it's just been fun. We've done Ben Reilly, we've done The Last Hunt, we've done Shadow of the Green Goblin, we've got another one in the works that I can't talk about. So it's amazing to me, after all these years, that I can still engage with these characters and find new things to say. Because that's the key to it. You have to find new things to say. If you're just retreading the things you said before, then you shouldn't be doing it. But in each of these miniseries, I have found a new way into their heads and something new to say about these characters. And it's been really fun.
Mr. DeMatteis, when you were coming up in the industry, who and what were your biggest inspirations? And who are your favorite Marvel DC characters?
So comic book wise, my biggest inspirations. Well, you know, I when I was really younger, it was all the DCs, you know, the classic DC stuff, Justice League and Green Lantern in the 60s and all that. And then Marvel came along when I was, you know, well, Marvel had been around, but I discovered Marvel when I was in junior high school. And so Lee and Kirby, certainly massive inspirations. Kirby above all others, probably. If I had to pick one person in the history of comics who has inspired me with his work, both with Stan and on his own, it's Kirby. The only person in the history of comics that I would use the word genius to describe. Just an extraordinary, extraordinary talent. And still to this day inspires me. The New Gods comics, his New Gods comics at DC are my favorite comics of all time. I return to them periodically, and each time I go back to them, I find new things. Steve Gerber, the work he did at Marvel in the 70s, and just extraordinary. Showed me that, oh, yeah, this is mainstream comics, but you can do some great, weird, deep, personal shit here, you know? And so Len Wein is a big influence, both through his writing, and Len as an editor became my mentor and my friend and really helped shape me as a writer. So many other people, if I start listing them, I'm going to think, oh, I forgot this one, I forgot that one. So, you know, many, many people, but those are the names that come to mind first and foremost.
It saddens me.
Oh, they want to know what some of my favorite characters?
Yeah, from Marvel.
I have two answers. One, it's whatever character I'm writing at the moment. But at Marvel, probably if I had to pick, you know, well, Peter, obviously, Spider-Man, and that, yes. Silver Surfer. I love the Silver Surfer. That's a character I'd love to return to. I had a short run on Silver Surfer.
You did have a good run on his, yeah. It was...
And Doctor Strange. Love Doctor Strange. And at DC, you know, how could you not love Superman and Batman? But I really also, again, the Justice League characters, they're not characters. Those guys are my friends. Beetle and Booster, it's like I've been, you know, people that I know as well as the friends that I grew up with. But in terms of characters that really excite me, I love the DC supernatural characters. Love those characters. They have such a deep bench of great supernatural characters. I wrote Justice League Dark and Phantom Stranger simultaneously for a couple of years. I got to play with all those characters, and I could have done that forever. And yes, New Gods is amazing. Oop, you just froze. Did we lose you? Uh-oh. Omar. I'm going to sign out and sign back in again. How's that?
Yeah,
we're back.
We got a big lightning hit outside, so I'm using my phone.
Yeah, I know you look completely different now.
I am using my phone to get through StreamYard because I was like, oh, I can't leave him hanging. So luckily the lights came on again.
All right. If you get lost this time, like I said, I'm happy to come back and talk some more.
And please do. So just in case, I'm going to take just a couple more questions and then call it because I don't know how much juice.
I do want to mention my current DC project, which is the Robin Lives story, which basically picks up where the famous Jim Aparo, Jim Starlin story, where Joker killed Robin.
Yes.
So working on that with Rick Leonardi, having a great time. It's another really deep dive into the psychology of these characters and the dysfunction and the trauma that they all have to live with as a result of what happened with the Joker. Having a great time with it. And the first issue came out the beginning of this month. So I guess the second issue will be out very shortly.
I'm very happy about that. Like seeing you go into, I had just interviewed Jim Starlin, who of course killed off the character.
Right.
As he kills off a lot of characters. And we were talking about that. about his possibility of returning ever to any of these characters, and he was like, I think I've said what I wanted to say. I'm gonna, I think others need a turn at it. So I think I was very happy to see your name attached to
Right.
that
When
project.
DC called me, my first question was, why isn't Jim Starlin writing this? Starlin's another creator I have a tremendous respect for. His stuff that he did in the 70s at Marvel, especially on Captain Marvel and Warlock, some of my favorite comics of all time. Just great stuff.
Oh man, that was scary. Quick, tell us what you really think about it, Omar. I appreciate you asking those questions when I was gone. Uh, have you had in mind the entire Vermin arc since his first appearance in Captain America, or did you find his character interesting enough to give him an extra time? Yeah, I'm curious about these
Yeah.
things too,
These
and how much.
characters evolve. When we introduced Vermin in Captain America, I had a sense of who that character was, but we didn't have a chance to dive in more deeply. Then he kind of returned to Captain America. I used him in Marvel Team On, but I realized there's something here in this character that I like. I don't completely understand him yet. And then in The Child Within was the chance to really say, which is the question I'm always asking, who is this? Who's in there? He's not just some crazy little man rat. There's a human being in there. What has he been through? How did he end up this way? What is his trauma? What is his pain? What are his struggles? What are his hopes? And so that if I had to pick one storyline out of Spider-Man, as opposed to a single issue like Spec 200, The Child Within is one of my absolute favorite things I've ever done with Spider-Man. That ran in the first 7 issues is spectacular.
Yeah. Okay, I will take just one more question, and then we can all get back to work. Yeah, the storms are pretty bad right now. I have a copy of the 1997 Batman Spider-Man crossover. How does that feel like to see? Like, did you ever think that's ever going to come back to print?
It's great because I first I did Spider-Man Batman for Marvel, then I did Batman Spider-Man for DC. So not only did I get to do it once, I got to do it twice. And that's one of those things, while you're doing it, it's the gig. And then years later, I look back and I wait, no one else has ever done that. No one ever got to tell these two guys together in a story, just the two of them. I'm the only person that did it, and I got to do it for both companies. So now all these years later, I'm like, that's amazing. I don't think it hit me at the time how amazing it was. Anyway, yeah, so I'm really happy they're coming back into print. And in fact, there was one little glitch in the DC version that has bothered me for whatever it is, 25 years that I got them to correct. So I'm really, really happy it's coming back to print. But it was really to play with both those characters, and Mark Bagley did the Marvel one, and I'm blanking who did the DC one. Graham Nolan did the DC one. Both of them did.
Graham Nolan did the DC one. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That was those are so, and it's so awesome that they're coming back. Somebody was asking about your feelings on AI, and I don't know. I'm sorry. I can't pull it up because everything flickered. So I'm on a new computer.
Oh, that's okay. That's okay. And again, if you disappear again, that'll be your dramatic way of concluding the interview. and Aaron, thank you for your kind words, Aaron.
Yeah, Aaron is a huge fan of yours. Huge fan. And a huge fan to our friend of the channel, just like Andrew is. Thank you so much, JM. What's his song track for the characters? Oh, do you listen to music when you're writing?
Well, what's interesting is I'm a musician, I'm a singer, I'm a songwriter, but when I'm writing, can't listen to music. When I'm editing the script, I can put on anything, and that's fine. But the only thing I can listen to when I'm writing is like ambient, spacey background music. If something has too strong a melody, if it's got lyrics, I find it distracting, and I can't listen to it. Once I'm done with the basic creating and I'm going back in, to fix that sentence and correct this and move that, I can put on anything, and I do. But when I'm writing, I can't. Music is just a distraction to me, unless it's just that floaty, spacey, new agey stuff in the background. Oh, you're welcome, Omar. Oh, I said Omar. Justin, so glad I'm sorry.
People are fanboying about you.
And I appreciate it.
I fanboyed right before we started.
How do I feel about AI?
In the same vein of technological advances,
yeah, it's kind of I feel great about AI in terms of what it can do in terms of medicine and things like that. In terms of art and writing, it's all kind of creepy and weird, especially since these AI companies are all scraping the internet and stealing everyone's work to train their AI. So, you know, if they were doing that and maybe compensating the people they were stealing from, that might be a different story. But they're not. You know, in the end, this technology is here to stay, and I think it will probably find its level. Just, you know, once upon a time, we could not imagine creating comics digitally on a computer. You will always need a true artist to create with this stuff. You just will. You just will. I don't want to live in a world where some machine is creating and the creative people are left out in the cold, because it's a machine and it cannot create from its heart because it doesn't have a heart.
Well, the brave little toaster wants a word with you, sir. Is it true?
Well, the brave little toaster does have a heart, but that's another story entirely.
Is it true that you were supposed to be on a Spider-Man title after Kraven's Last Hunt, like an ongoing?
No, what it was that when we originally signed on to do Kraven, it was going to be a run on Spectacular Spider-Man. Our editor, Jim Salicrup, was the brilliant guy that had this incredible idea. He said, "You can't have Spider-Man dead in Spectacular Spider-Man and fighting Dr. Octopus and Amazing Spider-Man. It's going to ruin the reality of the story. So let's take this story and run it through all 3 books." No one had ever done that before. Everyone's been doing it ever since. And Jim Salicrup gets all the credit for that.
That was a big crossover back then. I remember being a kid and thinking the same. What you just said. We didn't do that stuff.
Yeah, no, it had never been done before. And that's all Jim's doing. I always give him credit for that.
That did not happen. And it was new back then. And now it's almost like taking for granted that, oh yeah, of course we're having a crossover. What has it been 3 months since the last one? Yeah,
right. But that was specifically, that was not like a crossover. A bunch of, this was like the one story told with one character through 6 issues. You know what I mean? Which made it even more special, as opposed to when there's some big crossover going on, and which always I always have a hard time with. Oh, you're gone again. Oh, you're back again.
Nope. I have decided to come back and use the computer really quick.
Okay.
And professionally instead of using my phone.
All right.
It seems like we got power back, so just in case.
Okay.
Do go on though. You were talking about we were talking about crossovers and just
right. You know, I was never a big fan of the kind of crossover where I'm working on a monthly book and they're doing the giant crossover, and suddenly you have to stop your story because for 2 months you have to bring in this big Uber story that they're telling in the big crossover. And I prefer to be off in my little corner telling my stories. I've had some crossovers that I've had fun with, but for the most part, I want to be left alone to tell my story.
You did go through that in your issues of X Factor, I remember, because you wrote those particular issues right after it was. I want to say it was after Peter David left, and then Howard Mackie eventually took over the book. And it makes for. I mean, it had to have been.
I think Todd DeZago actually took over the book after I left. Yeah.
Todd DeZago. Yeah, and then Howard Mackie ended up finishing the run because you came in at 92. Oh my gosh, my X head here. Hold on. You came in at 90. You wrote it.
I just remember it's one of those. I think it was one of those big hologram cover issues. So
yep, it was the
Scott Lobdell plotted it. I scripted it, and I think Joe Quesada did the art.
Yep, it was the. I'm hoping for a Kraven's Last Hunt gallery edition someday. Same here, Mr. DeMatteis. I have a question. If you could come back to write any Marvel DC, what character would it be? You mentioned a lot, but if you had a choice,
I tell you what I would really love to write is Fantastic Four. Giffen, McGuire, and I talked for years. Oh God, we would.
You guys
the
would
3 of us to do Fantastic Four. We can't do that anymore, but I would love a shot at Fantastic Four because those Lee Kirby issues of Fantastic Four are some of my favorite comics of all time, and they're just such great characters. And like our JLI, yeah, it's big cosmic adventure, but there's a lot of humor at work in the Fantastic Four as well. People forget that Stan was a very, very funny writer.
Funny how it seems no writer likes big events, but still happens every 6 months.
And the reality is, if people didn't buy them, they wouldn't happen every 6 months. It's just it's the fans like them, and that's great. And I'm not knocking it. Whatever it takes to keep these stories and characters going, they have to do it.
I remember Peter David once saying that he hated writing crossovers, but damn it, those books outsold any of his other books because they were tied into the X-Men. So they need to. You got to do whatever it takes to get the books off the shelves.
Yeah, exactly. And if tomorrow people stop buying big crossovers, there would be no more big crossovers for a long time.
And at this moment, I just want to say a big thank you again to Mr. DeMatteis for coming on and talking to me. And you are always welcome back, sir. You're one of my favorite creators, and it has been a pleasure to talk to you and just to see how kind and good of a human being you are too, because that's good. That one of my favorite creators also happens to be a good human being is a plus. You know, naming all the co-create all the people that worked on these particular books, including the editors, and then talking about the colors, the colorist, and the letterers that helped put all this together. I think it just says a lot about you.
Well, thank
So
you.
thank you so much.
And thank you to everybody that's been writing in with these kind words. I appreciate it. I never take it for granted. You know what I mean? It means a lot to me, because I always say, you know, I'm here alone in this room playing with my imaginary friends, and you forget there's a world out there. And then suddenly it's like, oh yeah, people read these stories and they enjoy them and they mean something. And that's a great thing.
So I am going to leave in the chat the link to the Kickstarter.
Great.
Spellbound Comics, the Demultiverse that is going on right now. And it is also in the description of the video in case you're watching this later. And if you're joining us, you know that I get to announce things for Marvel Comics as far as omnis and collected editions. And you know that I've signed an NDA and I can't get into specifics. But I will say there is an announcement that's coming soon. That is something by Mr. JM DeMatteis. So it's going to be
I suspect I know what you're talking about as well.
It's not the Spectre. I can tell you that much, sir. As much as I want to get to announce
I would love to see that too. Yeah, that'd be great.
That's one of my most wanted. I love that book. Oh,
but that's one of those books where we'll wrap with this, where I when it was coming out, I thought everybody hated it, because there were all these people that wanted their old Spectre back. Not Hal Jordan as the Spectre.
Right?
And then were all the Green Lantern fans that wanted Hal as Green Lantern. So all I was seeing was a lot of negativity. And then as the years passed, so many people have come up to me to tell me how much they enjoyed that run and how much those stories meant to them. So yeah, I would love to see that collected. Same here. That's one of my most wanted. And if DC ever lets me announce things for them, I'd be more than happy to. Oh my gosh. But yes, there will be something with your name on your name on the spine that makes me really happy that you know, people have been wanting. So that's all I can say about that. But yeah, unfortunately it's not that. Or Dr. Fate, that's another one that people forget about. I really liked your run on that. Oh, here we go. Does he know Dr. Fate got voted so high in the top? No, I did not. And I forwarded that list over to DC. So that's great. I actually have a bound edition that a fan was kind enough to give to me at a convention, which was just phenomenal. So I have one copy of a Dr. Fate omnibus. That's awesome. Yeah. Yep. Right. Andrew knows. Andrew said he has it. Man, Andrew knows. That's right. Andrew. Well, I think it might have been Andrew that gave it to me. I think Andrew does have custom bound Spectacular Spider-Man omnis, and he also has the Innocenti one. He may have been. He's a custom bound guy. Wow. But at this moment, check out the Kickstarter. Yeah, please come along with us on this Kickstarter. It means the world to me. So I'd love to have all of you who are watching come along, if you can afford it. You're such a kind guy. And thank you all so much for watching. And hit that like button on the way out. And if you're watching this later, the description of the video does have the link to the Kickstarter, and it's up for a few more days. And someone should make. Actually, I have a custom Scooby-Doo Apocalypse omnibus. It's huge, huge. And who knows? Maybe one day, who knows? Maybe DC will. Everything gets collected eventually. Even DC versus Marvel, which we didn't think was going to happen. That's right. That's right. Well, it's been great to talk to you, Omar. Thank you so much. Absolutely. It's been a pleasure, sir. Everybody have a wonderful day.